I use YouTube a ton. Obviously, I am somebody who has decided to give a go at having a YouTube channel, so maybe that's pretty evident. But for most of my entertainment, I find myself scrolling on YouTube or looking through my subscriptions for something to watch the majority of the time that I have free time to do so. So I feel like as we come to the end of 2025, I kind of want to showcase some of the favorite things that I've experienced in the past year, and that led me to the idea of creating two videos. The first is this video, where I showcase my favorite YouTube channels of 2025, and the second will be a video about my favorite games or gaming experiences that I had this year as well. I have personally found that sometimes the way that YouTube recommends videos or channels to me doesn't necessarily align with my goal of finding new and interesting stuff to watch. So my hope here is to, like I said, showcase a handful of smaller channels that you may not have come across your feed or you might not be able to find searching for things, but that you might enjoy if you enjoy my videos. That is not to say that the channels I'm going to showcase here are a lot like my channel or like the videos that I make, but if you, I don't know, fuck with my vibe, potentially you might enjoy a few of these. To kind of organize this, I've broken it up into three categories. The first will be music channels, the second will be smaller gaming channels, and the third will be a miscellaneous weird category filled with random channels that I enjoy. I tried to keep it more exclusive to channels that are smaller because I feel like these are the channels that are more difficult to access, the hidden gems on YouTube. But there are some channels later on that probably have around 50,000 subscribers. Nonetheless, I think in the grand scheme of things, that's a pretty small group of people who've probably actually seen that content. So I thought I would include that as well. Please, if you find yourself connecting with any of these channels that I showcase, or you find yourself interested in potentially checking them out, I really sincerely urge you to head over to the channel. The link will be included to all of the channels in the description and a pinned comment down below. And I further suggest to you to kindly, if you do enjoy their channel, consider subscribing, liking the videos, and leaving a comment to let that person know what you think of what they're making, as the internet can be a kind of lonely place sometimes, and any kind of communication with other people is usually very much appreciated for the people who are making videos and stuff. All right, I'm rambling too much. Okay, here's some channels, guys. So I cannot start the music category off without talking about Detrea. If you guys have seen any of my bigger videos, the one that the incredibly talented Michael Veselovsky has edited or had a large part in helping me put together, you most likely have heard music from Detrea. He's done some amazing remixes of marathon-related music, and also his own stuff is incredible, and the marathon tracks are now on Spotify. Go to his channel, show him love, check out the music. It sounds great, dude. It's just fantastic. I think if you fuck with any of the marathon stuff, you're probably going to connect with some of the tracks he has here. The next music channel I want to talk about is Talishar. Talishar is probably someone you're familiar with if you're pretty tapped into the marathon Discord or the marathon subreddit, because I feel like a lot of their music has been shared over there. And it's another channel that I find myself coming back to pretty consistently. They've done a bunch of great music and a bunch of like fan soundtracks for the original marathon games that capture the tone of those games really, really well. And I feel like are kind of crucial considering 2 and Infinity don't have like a traditional soundtrack in the same way that Marathon 1 does. Next, I want to talk about the channel Crisp. Crisp might have like a significantly larger following than like what I'm thinking, given that I primarily listen to their music through, the games that their music is included in and their YouTube channel that only has 827 subscribers right now. But their music has been featured in a ton of incredible indie games. And specifically, I was introduced to them through Pigface, which if you played Pigface, you know it has an amazing soundtrack. I definitely recommend checking out their music. Great to throw on in the background. And if you haven't played Pigface, maybe also play Pigface. We're not in the game recommendations, but YouTube channels, to get the Pigface itch there, check out the Crisp YouTube channel. They have great music. And the last music channel I want to showcase here is Synexo. I don't know, Synexo might be another one that has some like incredibly large online presence that I'm unaware of. Their YouTube channel only has 17,000 subscribers, and the music is just like this classic pixel electronic poppy stuff. I don't know. The art attached to it is incredible as well, and you can check out the artists and descriptions for their videos. I just think the whole vibe of the channel is fantastic, and the music sounds really great to throw on, and I recommend checking them out. Next, I'm going to move on to some smaller gaming channels that I think deserve a lot more love. And some of these you might be familiar with if you've been around the channel for a while, and I think most of those are at the front end, so let's get through them. First, I got to talk about Sado. I believe the handle is Your Sado TV, maybe on YouTube right now, but also had the channel Sado Talks Marathon. I met Sado very early on making YouTube videos about marathon and saw that he was also working on marathon videos, and getting to like do podcast type stuff with him and stream with him has been an absolute pleasure. He makes very thoughtful and intelligent videos about Destiny. He's one of those dudes who's like deep in the grind. He's got the spreadsheets out, he knows the numbers, very informative if you're somebody who like puts a lot of time in Destiny, and also just a very kind, chill person. And, the tone and vibe of his channel is also excellent. I recommend checking him out. And like I said, also does marathon related content that I'm sure will be just as informational and interesting as the stuff he's done for Destiny upon release for Marathon as well. Next, I got to talk about Aperture Grills. Aperture Grills has a very small YouTube channel. I feel like they're the most prolific marathon speedrunner like in marathon history. They're just fantastic, incredibly knowledgeable at the game. Another person that I had the opportunity to interview last year during my 30th anniversary marathon stream that happened in December of 2024. And just a very kind person, very genuine, very articulate. And he uploads these incredible speedruns, not just for all the original marathon games, also for Tetris the Grandmaster, I'm pretty sure is the one that he does a lot of. And it is just incredible to see someone perform at such a high level in a game, especially for someone like me, who is generally pretty ass at gaming. Next, I have to once again point you guys in the direction of Joku. Joku is like the most comprehensive marathon channel on YouTube. If you have any interest in the lore and story from the original marathon games, or even old Bungie games in general, like Myth, he has an incredible series on, and Pathways into Darkness as well, definitely consider giving his channel a watch and checking out his series. Seriously, you can throw on his marathon in-depth series in the background and have it run and just be, burning on marathon lore for what, like 40 hours or something at this point, and he's still, clanking away at Marathon 2 right now. So fantastic channel, very kind person, and like I said, very, very in-depth, granular kind of mathematical coverage almost of every granular detail about Marathon, from its production, the narrative stuff itself, the story of how it was made, like, really anything. Very comprehensive, very cool channel. Oh, I also want to throw in here two channels. One, TBCR, another marathon speedrunner and VTuber, another very chill, kind person. I haven't watched a ton of their stuff, but I know they upload very frequently on YouTube. And also, I want to shout out ADB Games, if you're familiar with the fantastic and super talented Undefined. They've worked on a ton of marathon fan projects in the community. I'll put a few on screen right now. But basically 90% of super cool stuff that the fan community has made around this upcoming marathon game has been touched in some way by Undefined. And his studio, or whatever you want to call it, he makes, indie games, Crazy Shipping. If you haven't played it, very fantastic. I'll put a link to it on Steam down below. He has a channel for his independent game studio, and I recommend checking him out there and anywhere else you can on the internet. But I wanted to throw these mentions in there as well, just so I didn't forget about them. Okay, the next channel is one that I am super fond of, and I find myself coming back to his marathon videos pretty frequently. I don't know how he's going to tackle Marathon Infinity. I'm very curious to see it, but it's called EMS, EMMS. EMS does these like fan audiobooks for Destiny lore, and like I said, recently this year he made these incredible like cinematic retellings of the story of Marathon 1 and 2, which are just another example of videos that you can kind of always have burning in the background, just slowly absorbing the excellent Marathon world. But I recommend checking out his stuff. Another, like I said, great channel, just kind of always have going, if you love the lore of Bungie games and story stuff. It's cool. And like I said, the way that he presents it is a lot better than you think it would, considering I think his channel only has like 1,000 subscribers right now. Next, I want to talk about Tau Ceti News Network. Tau Ceti News Network is somebody who had come along, I think earlier this year, and started making videos about Marathon. And he did this really cool 2-part video about the weapons of Marathon prior to us seeing any gameplay stuff. And the way that he broke it down was just very informative. And I think that he's just a very articulate person, and the production quality on the videos, given his size, is really impressive. And I think that as the channel grows and he continues to make videos, we're going to see him like very much so evolve into a pretty talented creator in the space. And I recommend jumping on board early while you still can. All right, the last 2 gaming channels I want to talk about are kind of journalistic endeavors. And so this might be another situation where potentially the people behind the channels have like a much larger following elsewhere. But I personally know of them through their YouTube channels, which are pretty small. The first is called The Game Business. It's by this dude, Christopher Dreen, I believe. I'm sorry if I'm butchering how to say your name. I feel like I fuck up ing words. All right, we're not going to get into that. Anyways, The Game Business is like this fantastic, very professional, well put together podcast style thing that talks about like the actual business end of game development, which I feel like as someone who is generally pretty chill, maybe isn't something that I'm always considering or thinking about, the multi-billion-dollar industry component of like, I enjoy science fiction stories and shooting people in the back. So to get that kind of perspective on the industry is something that is largely outside my purview, and for it to be presented in such a kind of thoughtful way and like I said, very professionally, it's something that I found myself really enjoying hearing their perspective on. And they also do like some pretty high-level interviews with people that you wouldn't expect. Like I said, like business side players and video game companies, all around fantastic. And I recommend, if you want to stay up to date with kind of the gaming industry for whatever reason, I think it's a pretty great place to start is watching this channel. The next channel is called Pixel Fabula. Now, Pixel Fabula is someone that I kind of recently found, so I'm not super familiar with their background, but as somebody who grew up as a gamer, I was a teenager in like the 2010s, and so a lot of kind of foundational games, especially in a multiplayer kind of realm. I feel like he interviews the creators behind these games or talks to like major players in the esports world, or, just doing these like very thoughtful, very kind of granular almost interviews with people who are kind of these shadowy figures, for whatever property he's talking about. Maybe I'm describing this very poorly. Shadowy figure. He's not like interviewing the underground crime world of gaming, but like, for example, talking to somebody who was very involved with DayZ, or talking to, a voice actor from a game, or talking to somebody who was behind, like a certain game design element that got used a lot. These are like things that he'll do, and they're very interesting, even if I'm not particularly knowledgeable about the person that he's interviewing. I found myself enjoying these more and more. All right, that does it for the gaming channels. Oh, one thing I do want to also include is that the gameplay footage that I'm using right now comes from this guy who goes by Yo, I'm Kami. Yo, I'm Kami is someone who's been very friendly and hung out around the community for a while now. They have a YouTube channel. I always link to it in the description when I use the Marathon Alpha gameplay footage that they gave me a bunch of, just so I can kind of have background footage for my videos. And I do recommend checking out their channel. I don't think any videos are posted right now, but I do know that they've been working on some really cool marathon oriented videos and video projects that they're going to be posting. So potentially check out their channel, which will be linked down below as well, because I do think some videos are probably coming that way for that. Okay, moving on, these last 5 channels are just kind of not really in the gaming lane at all, just kind of channels that I individually find interesting for whatever reason. So take these with a grain of salt, as like I said, it's very different from anything that I kind of do on my channel. So potentially you might not connect with these, but if you want to expand your horizons and try something new, or you have like similar interests to me, maybe you'll find these compelling. Okay, the first channel I want to talk about is Peyton Talbot. Peyton Talbot is a MMA fighter currently signed to the UFC. I personally have been like a very huge mixed martial arts fan for a very long time, and I feel like one of the difficulties with the sport, well, really any combat sports, is that a lot of the people who are athletes within the sport kind of suck. They are like friends with the worst people on the planet, or just say really derogatory, hurtful things. Just a lot of very not chill people. And I'm sure in part that's because you kind of have to be a certain type of person to engage with the athletic component of causing physical damage to someone. And a certain part of that probably has to do with, brain damage over an extended period of time. But the vibes for a lot of professional athletes in the MMA community aren't that great. And as somebody who grew up wrestling and, was very familiar with early mixed martial arts and kind of had a very young interest in the sport, as you get older, you kind of realize how big of a scumbags a lot of people in the sport are. So when you find somebody who is like seemingly a pretty genuine, down to earth kind person, and also they're incredibly talented within the UFC or mixed martial arts as a whole, it really kind of stands out. And Peyton Talbot, uh, entirely aside from being a professional athlete in the UFC, has a really just fantastic, I want to say kind of like vlog style YouTube channel where he just showcases his life in the lead up to these professional sporting events that he takes part in. I think maybe from just that description, I'm not doing it like a ton of service in describing it, because I do feel like even if you aren't interested in sporting at all, there is something here for you. Just his aesthetic and design sense and the editing to the videos, always very compelling. If you're like a, kind of maybe psychedelic, trippy person who likes a little bit of youth-fueled debauchery, I feel like this might be right up your alley. And like I said, just seems like a pretty genuine, down-to-earth person as well. The next channel I want to talk about in this section is Sussex County Bigfoot. I believe when I had met this person, it was called like In the Shadow of the Big Red Eye, maybe was what it was called, or maybe that was just the merch that they were selling. But this is a guy who drives around America, I think like full-time, hunting for Bigfoot, which I think to most people that sounds like a kind of eccentric, extreme thing to do. And I don't know that if I would have found this channel just on YouTube, it's something that I would have, invested a lot of time watching. But actually, this guy came to my local library, and my son was really into Bigfoot, still is. And so we went and listened to him give this talk at the local library. And I just feel like something about the culture of local library presentations has always really connected with me. And I just value when a community puts forth resources to allow different perspectives and viewpoints to be kind of shared in this public forum. And the fact that he's kind of doing this on his own as this independent business entity, there's just a lot of compelling elements to it for me. And watching him kind of plunk around in the woods and do Bigfoot calls is something that I find fun. And the passion is something that I really appreciate. Maybe that's something, specifically that I just find a lot of value in, regardless of whether or not I necessarily agree or believe in Bigfoot or anything for that matter. When people are very passionate about something, I find that that's a very admirable trait. And this person is very passionate, and they were very kind. And what a cool character to get to meet. So I recommend at least definitely giving it a look and kind of seeing what he's up to. I believe he was also featured in an Andrew Callahan video, which if you're familiar with All Gas No Brakes or Channel 5, a larger kind of person in, I don't know if you would call it journalism or whatever it is, has done some pretty big interviews. So he's definitely been around and seen a few things, but his YouTube channel only has, I think, around 5,000 subscribers, but definitely worth giving it a peek just to kind of see this unique, quirky perspective of somebody. The next channel I want to talk about is called Dixie After Dark. If you don't know, I was born in Virginia and I spent a lot of time basically in Virginia and Florida. And so I'm very familiar with the southeastern portion of the United States. And Dixie After Dark creates these really kind of like excellent, interesting looks at history from the American South with like a slant towards cryptids and hauntings and weird, local myth from Appalachia. It's just something that I feel like I uniquely connect with because obviously I grew up around a lot of people who were very familiar with these locations and these ideas and just encountering them in day-to-day life. While not something that I was particularly a part of because my parents weren't local to this area prior to me moving here as a child, I do find it very compelling to hear these kind of stories about Mothman and Bigfoot even on here as well, and how that has been kind of localized to Appalachia and the American southern, region as well. And the production quality on the videos is really good, and the fact that they put out so many, I think it's a video every week maybe, and they just seem like very well written and very well researched and visually stimulating to look at. And I don't know, a good channel. And if you've ever had any interest in kind of the wackiness of the American South, it's very much in line with a lot of those interests. The next channel is called What Might Grow. Another one that might have like a huge following somewhere else, but I've only, encountered them or seen their stuff on YouTube, so I just wouldn't be aware of that. But they do these videos where they'll take just, regular everyday items like rice or, an Arby's burger. I'm just kind of looking at some of the videos that are recommended to me right now, and they'll swab them and they'll put them on petri dishes and they'll see what grows. And they just kind of like talk about the bacteria or fungi that exists and what it could do to you. And it's kind of like one of these nerd channels that's also very silly. And I kind of like the dichotomy of you're cotton swabbing something that's, very ridiculous, and then also doing this kind of very intensive or, scientific procedure. Maybe that's just because I'm a layman and it looks fancy when they're pulling out the swabs and the petri dishes, but it's always interesting to me to see what kind of cultures and stuff grow. And obviously, if you've followed me talking about Marathon, I'm endlessly compelled by kind of the hive mind, nature of these living organisms that exist all around us, and spores and shit in the air. And I don't know, it's a fun channel to watch, especially as like some of the shorts, you can just see like, oh, what's going to grow? What kind of nasty stuff is going to appear in this petri dish from this bag of rice or whatever he's got? Pretty fun. And the last channel that I want to talk about, and I feel like maybe this is probably the biggest channel on here, while still a relatively smaller creator on YouTube, I do feel like potentially maybe he's been involved with other projects that are significantly larger, but I just kind of end up watching his individual stuff, is called Noke Eric, or Eric Bernhagen. This guy, let me say this actually, the videos might gross you out. I feel like as somebody who grew up in peak like Adult Swim era and just kind of finding weird stuff on the internet, his videos really touch on something that is kind of maybe lacking in a modern context on the internet. They're these kind of like gross, absurdist skits that also rely on a lot of like creativity in terms of like the animation and camera techniques that he uses. I don't know. This is probably the one where I would say like probably only a small number of people are going to think this is interesting or connect with it. But the creativity behind it and the characters that he plays and how absurd and uncomfortable it makes you feel is something that I feel like is very artistic in a strange way, kind of very abstract kind of thing going on. But I always find myself enjoying how strange and absurd the projects that he puts out are, and how it makes me feel uncomfortable and gross. So definitely check it out if that's something that sounds somewhat up your alley. All right, this video has gone on far longer than I thought it would, so apologies for that, but I hope that potentially if you watch this whole thing or listen to what I was talking about here, maybe you found a channel on YouTube that you wouldn't have otherwise, and you can go and enjoy those videos. And like I said earlier, if that's the case and you thought, oh, maybe this is interesting, this is something I might look at, please head over to their channel and like, subscribe, comment, let them know how you feel about it, and just generally engage with people's stuff that they're creating and you enjoy, because I think it means a lot to the people who created it, and also it brings more stuff for you to watch and engage with in the future. All right, top YouTube channels 2025, something, I don't know, some sort of algorithmically an official title for the video that I came up with after recording this audio. All right, I love you guys. I'll see you later. Have a good one. Bye.